Here comes the moment of truth. I'm going to be brutally honest. There is no solution to the housing crisis. I don't care which party you're supporting. I don't care what the politicians are telling you. Listen, all politicians lie to a certain degree. And whatever they're telling you is 100% made up BS. Many people have mentioned in the previous videos where I talk about Canada's population explosion, and millions of young people will have to face the reality that they will never ever be able to own a home in the future. And some people said that why don't we just bring in more immigrants that works in the skilled trade, and these people can help Canada to build more homes. Oh, that is a very, very naive thinking. Only if things were actually that simple. Think about it like this. How much do you guys think it costs to actually build a home? It is extremely, extremely expensive. So I'll give you an example, just what happened in the past year. So in just the past 12 months in Canada, over 200 housing projects in Canada went into insolvency. They went into a bankruptcy. They promised to build tens and thousands of new homes across Canada, but over 200 projects actually went bankrupt. Yes, insolvencies have always happened in the past, but over 200 in a single year, that is actually over 50% higher than the national average compared to just 10 years ago. So what happened? Think about the pandemic. Think about the Canadian government printing money. Think about the inflation. Look at this. This is according to the Royal Bank of Canada. In just the past 4 years, from 2020 to 2024, what do you need in order to build houses? You need steel, right? Steel is up 55%. You also need concrete. Concrete is up 53%. Wages, you need labor, right? Labor is up 10%. So the key point I'm trying to make is that imagine, let's say if you're a developer and let's say you want to build 10 brand new condos, let's say somewhere in the greater Toronto area. And you can't just bring a team and go in there and says that we're going to start digging because you will need a lot of capital. So the developers of these condos, they're facing the same crisis. In order to come up with that cash, they need to first get a loan approved from the bank. This is like a super massive mortgage. And let's say if you wanted a mortgage of $100 million in order to build all of these brand new condos in the greater Toronto area. Well, it's the same rule for the developers. You have to come up with at least a 20% down payment, or roughly 20 million. Where's that 20 million going to come from? So in most cases of these new high-rise buildings, a couple years before the construction even starts, the developers will start to try to sell these condos. And unless they can actually pre-sell 70% of the units that is set to be built within the next 5 years, they actually cannot come up with enough money to pay the bank their 20% down payment in order to actually get the $100 million loan in order to start the construction. This is the major issue. So what has happened in the past few years is that for example, if the developers they started this new housing project in 2018, and they are able to pre-sell 70% of their units at 2018 prices, and they're able to get their $100 million loan from the bank to start building these condos. And what happened? 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, inflation happened every single year. So now what has happened is that the condos they sold back in 2018, let's say for $300,000, the average price of these new condos in 2024 is actually $600,000. So this is becoming an epidemic of a forced insolvency into bankruptcy for many of these developers due to a rapid inflation and the government printing money. And yes, this is also part of the reason why homes are getting so expensive. Because let's say for the developers, if they sold 70% of their condos back in 2018 or 2019 before the inflation era, before the pandemic, if they sold it for $300,000, but now we're living in the inflation era, and in order for the developer to actually make a profit, never mind the profit, just for them to break even, they only have the remaining 30% of their units to sell. And in order to try to break even or to actually chase a profit, they had to sell the remaining 30% of units at insane prices. And that is why the average price of a one-bedroom condo in downtown Toronto jumped from $275,000 Canadian in 2015 to $550,000 in 2024. And also you have to take into account the fact that the interest rate has increased so much. This is according to the Toronto Dominion Bank. Back in 2015, the interest rate loaned out to these developers was at 2.5%. Jumping into 2024, it's at 6.8%. That's why over 200 housing projects went into insolvency. It is actually impossible for Canada to build any more homes. And this is why I'm so against all levels of immigration. Canada should not be accepting any more immigrants. Canada simply does not have the capital, the labor, or the resources to build any more homes. And I can guarantee you it's the exact same situation in the United States, in Australia, in New Zealand, in UK, and France. All the politicians are lying to you. There is no solution to the housing crisis. But wait, I mentioned in previous videos, right? Canada back in the 1970s, this is when Canada's population was only 22 million. Canada was building more homes back then versus today in 2024. Why is that? Why can't Canada do this now? I'm gonna tell you guys something you don't like, especially if you're a senior citizen. This is all due to the older generation. Well, you see, back in the 1970s, there simply wasn't that many old people in Canada. And all of this has happened to our society because the previous generation, they stopped having children. And the number one contributing factor was because in 1960, both USA and Canada approved the world's very first birth control pill. And for both of these countries, they became widely available for every single woman to use. Then the birth rate completely collapsed. Canada's fertility rate back in 1960 was 3.8 children per woman. Now it is 1.33. And why do I want to blame this on old people? I'm just trying to be brutally honest. I'm sorry. Think about it like this. Some people out there could be saying that if the developers, they can't come up with enough money to get a loan from the bank, why doesn't the government step in? Why don't the government shift more money from its national budget to help the developers so that more homes can get built in Canada? Well, the thing is that Canada is completely out of money. Canada is running on a budget deficit. So where's Canada spending all of its money? So right now, Canada's GDP in 2024 is roughly 2 trillion and 118 billion. So that is Canada's total economic output. And I want you guys to have a look at this. So this is Canada's federal budget for healthcare in 2023. $344 billion. That is a whopping sum of money. In fact, Canada spends more money on healthcare versus the military and education expenditure combined. On top of this, old age security for 65 plus seniors in Canada, the Canada's pension plan, also the seniors Medicare. This all adds up together to roughly $70 billion. And because of the massive expenditure in healthcare and also in old age security, Canada is forced to take on a deficit. When you take on a deficit, you have to pay back interest rates. And right now, Canada every single year will also have to pay $30 billion Canadian. This is just to cover the interest rate created by this deficit. So look at this. Add $344 billion plus $30 billion for interest rate payment, plus $70 million in Canada and Quebec pension plan, plus Medicare for seniors, plus the old age security. That is a whopping $444 billion. That is 21% of Canada's GDP. I'm sorry to say, where do you guys think the vast majority of that $344 billion is going? It's going to take care of old people, because what happens when you get old, your body is going to break down. Every time you visit the hospital, you'll notice that it's full of old people. That's just the reality. You have to remember this. So back when Franklin D. Roosevelt, when he introduced the 65-year retirement age in the United States back in the 1930s, the average life expectancy in the United States was 63. It's pretty much the identical data coming out of Canada. So way back then, you simply worked all the way until death. You paid taxes until you're dead. So the boomers and the Gen X, when they grew up, they never had this tax burden from the seniors. Back in 1960, for every single person that's retired in Canada, there was 7 people working in order to contribute to their old age security and their Canada pension plan. In 2024, for every person that's retired in Canada, there's only 2.4 people working. And it's also extremely important to remember almost all the homes in Canada are owned by the previous generation. They're not being owned by millennials or Gen Z. They're all being owned by the boomers and the Gen X. They probably own 80 to 90% of the homes in Canada. Because way back in the day, they bought their house for peanuts. They bought their homes for $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. And these homes are now all worth $750,000, $1 million, $1.5 million, or $2 million. And because of rapid advances in technology and in the medical field, people are living longer and longer and longer. So many of these boomers, remember Canada's fertility rate peaked in 1960. So people who were born in 1960, they're 64 now. all these boomers are about to retire. They're about to stop paying taxes, and they're about to collect their old age security and Canada pension plan. And a lot of them will need to go to the hospital for regular checkups and visits. This is going to mean that within the next 5 to 10 years, Canada will have to shift 25 to 30 or even 35% of their GDP, of their national budget, towards actually helping these seniors. So that means that Canada won't have any money for young people. That is why the federal government is not able to actually give the developers any money to kickstart any housing projects. This is why the developers are forced to take out loans from the banks, loans that they're no longer able to pay back. That is what's happening because Canada is getting very, very old, and there are way too many old people, and this is causing a crisis. You want the brutal, honest truth? Let's say Canada's demographic was the same as it was back in 1960. Let's say for every single Canadian that's retired, there are actually 7 young Canadians that's entering the workforce. And let's say the life expectancy has not changed. Let's say there was no advances in the medical field. This will mean that the vast majority of seniors, 70 to 80%, will be wiped out overnight. And what would this mean? This would mean that Canada's housing vacancy rate would actually jump from its current 1.5% to 30%. This will also mean that the average price of a home in Canada will drop anywhere between 60 to 70%. This will also mean that Canada's federal budget will be in surplus. We no longer have to pay $30 billion in interest rate. In fact, the $70 billion for Medicare for seniors, Canada's old age security, Canada's pension plan, and also the whopping $344 billion for healthcare. This can all be slashed by anywhere between 70 to 80%. This means that Canada every single year will have a surplus of over $300 billion, and all of that money can be contributed to helping young people in order to build more homes, in order to give more money to schools so they don't have to be so desperate to accept so many international students, in order to charge them 3 times the tuition so that the schools don't have to shut down. This is the ultimate conundrum, because you can only save one generation. If you continue to help old people, if you continue to give these old people Medicare, if you continue to increase their old age security, if you continue to shift more money towards helping them with healthcare, this will ultimately doom the next generation. And if you want to help the next generation, let's say if you want to forgive their student loans, if you want to help these young people find housing, then the only solution is to get rid of the vast majority of the seniors that's living in Canada. There is no easy way around this. This is why Canada has already introduced MAID, medical assistance in dying. Canada is preparing for this. Because these politicians, they all know this. This is the reality. Because within the next 5, 10, 20, 25 years, Canada's budget will no longer be able to support a record number of people getting old and retiring in Canada. So this is their method to get rid of all of these old people. This is why young people will never be able to own a home, because 21% of Canada's GDP is all going to helping old people, and Canada no longer has any money to help the next generation to build more homes. There is no solution to the housing crisis. You have to be ready to accept that. No politician will be able to change this. No policy will be able to change this. And that is the ultimate dystopian reality.